All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Team Terence Crawford and what they had to say about Errol Spence Jr., and it is not kind. Wondering out loud if Errol Spence Jr. is not the next overhyped, washed up knockout victim. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford and what Terence Crawford's team, who, by the way, I absolutely positively love, had to say about Errol Spence Jr. and the Terence Crawford fight, but specifically Errol Spence Jr.'s and where he's going to stand in boxing history. Before I get into that, though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please accept my invitation to hit that subscribe button, hit that bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And if you are a longtime subscriber and supporter to the channel, thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching the videos in the live stream and in the super chat live streams and in the actual videos that we put up on the channel every day. Your support is greatly, greatly, greatly appreciated. All right, man, I had to do this video, first of all, because, man, it was like a punch in the gut. I was up watching YouTube last night and one of my favorite podcasts, and I'm telling you, this guy does not like me. I say it every single solitary time I mention his name. He does not like me. His name is Bernie the Boxer. Bernie the Boxer is in the camp of Terence Crawford. All right. Camp of Terence Crawford. You will see him standing next to Terence Crawford in the ring. So when anybody says this is not a source for Terence Crawford, it is a source for Terence Crawford's camp. 100, no doubt about it. And Bernie the Boxer, though, is one of the more knowledgeable guys about boxing that you can listen to. Some people run off their mouth about him because he's so Team Crawford and all that. I don't do that. This cat really knows the sport of boxing. And that's why I ask and encourage people, man, go listen to his podcast. It's not on a regular basis, but it comes out and he's talking about boxing. Very, very good conversations. Definitely listen to the guy. You can learn a lot about boxing. However, he came out and they said, ask the question, is Errol Spence Jr. the next Terry Norris? And my heart sunk to the bottom of my stomach because I was like, wow, that one right there is a needle to the chest in the reputation of Errol Spence Jr. If you are not familiar who Terry Norris is, Terry Norris is a former welterweight champion and an extremely, extremely talented fighter from Fort Worth, Texas, right? Which is not very far from Dallas, Texas, and in the same area that Errol Spence Jr. is from. He was I would say, safe to say that he was a knockout artist in the welterweight division, knocked out Milt McCrory, went on like a 2-year run as a welterweight champion. And then out of the blue, he gets into the ring with a guy from the UK named Milt McCrory. He's not Milt McCrory, excuse me, Lloyd Hunnigan. Lloyd Hunnigan, surprisingly beats, is listed as RTD, retired, beats up and defeats Terry Norris Jr. Terry Norris then goes up to, I believe he goes up to either 154 or 160, but he winds up getting knocked out by the likes of Mike McCallum, and maybe like 3 or 4 more times in his career he's knocked out, right? So perfect story of somebody that had a lot of hype behind him, was looking fantastic, you know, in the ring. And then all of a sudden he runs into somebody and pop goes the weasel. And the rest of his career is downhill from there. So clearly alluding to the fact that Errol Spence Jr. could get into the next big fight against Terence Crawford, get knocked out, and then go on a streak of moving up in weight and getting knocked out and exposed by a bunch of other guys, right? Oh, really, really, really tough scenario, right? To wonder out loud and compare Errol Spence Jr. to Terry Norris. I personally think that is like putting bad juju on that man. However, I stopped and I looked, I said, okay, let's actually look at Terry Norris and look at Errol Spence Jr. The first thing that came to my mind was, okay, one's an orthodox, one a southpaw. One is a guy that is really more of a Terry Norris, much more of a headhunter, and much more of a headhunter than Errol Spence Jr. is. Even though Terry Norris will definitely go to the body, Terrence, but he's not as I think Terry Norris is probably with one shot a bigger puncher than Errol Spence Jr., but I think Errol Spence Jr. is a more fundamentally sound fighter that is more focused on breaking his man down over the length of the fight versus looking for a big shot and expecting for a guy to go night like Milton McCory did, all out of, not necessarily out of the blue like that. But however, at the end of it, I was like, hold on, man, this isn't even really worth this, because the most important thing about the two is that they're two different people, and they're two different people that are fighting different people. So if I look at and say, for example, Milton McCory, who was a good fighter, was a world champion, got knocked out by Terry Norris, just because Terry Norris beat Mike McCallum does not mean that Terence Crawford's going to beat Mike McCallum. I thought, and I said, is there any welterweight that I would, not Mike McCallum, because Mike McCallum is up at 160, 154 and 160. I mean, Milton McCory. If he knocks out Milton McCory, just because Terry Norris beats Milton McCory, that does not mean Terence Crawford's going to beat Milton McCory, because triangle theories do not work. Right? There may have been, that may have been even though less known, a better crop of welterweights than Terence Crawford fought. Because I don't think Terence Crawford has fought anybody at welterweight that I would say is better than Milton McCory. And I don't know really if he's beaten anybody at that welterweight class that is any better than Lloyd Hunnigan at the time that Lloyd Hunnigan fought Donald Curry, right? Same thing goes. Same thing goes for Errol Spence Jr. And you match Errol Spence Jr. up with Lloyd Hunnigan. Do I think Lloyd Hunnigan is going to beat Terence Crawford? No. Do I think Lloyd Hunnigan is going to beat Errol Spence Jr.? No, I do not. But that was his day against Terry Norris. Shoot, if Terry Norris had fought the guy 3 times or been more focused that weekend, or he didn't have an injury, you just don't know how that's gonna play out, right? But the whole conversation of whether or not Errol Spence Jr. is going to just go pop and get knocked out and fade away and look like somebody else, that is, I think, a sign that Terence Crawford's camp underestimates Errol Spence Jr. and is maybe in the back of their mind just wishing that this guy is not what he looks like he is or what people thinks he is. Because, man, that is just a real funny trajectory to project on that guy. However, I will say this too. That's the trajectory of a lot of fighters. That's the trajectory of a lot of fighters. You could say that that's the trajectory. The Terry Norris trajectory was the trajectory of Roy Jones Jr. after a certain point in his career. If you just never know when your athleticism leaves, when your time is up, and these other guys got your number. And that has happened to a lot of fighters. Shoot, that could be the story of Canelo Alvarez for the rest of his career. Do not know. So, hey man, I'll be careful about putting that energy out on people, because who knows, man, Terence Crawford may be the next Roy Jones Jr. He may be the guy that, hey, becomes undisputed, moves up to 147 pounds, reigns for several years, and then he runs into an Antonio Tarver, a southpaw long southpaw that got your number. And all of a sudden, it's what's the excuses, Roy, right? You got any excuses, Terrence? That type of move, you just don't know, man. So, but anyway, I thought that was a fun conversation. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And it is what it is. And with that, I'm out.